prints belong to a 20-year-old man named Rudy Guede. You might also hear it pronounced Guede, but Rudy himself pronounces it Guede. And Rudy's fingerprints were on file in Italy because the government keeps fingerprints for all immigrants to the country, including Rudy, who arrived at age 6 from Ivory Coast in West Africa.
Does he have any sort of criminal record or anything like that?
He doesn't have a criminal record, but he had been investigated a few times by police, but not for anything violent. According to the Injustice in Perugia website, he had a history of break-ins and theft, and in fact, just a week before Meredith's death, he'd been caught pretty much red-handed breaking into a nursery school after hours. The owner and 2 repairmen walked in to find Rudy holding a giant knife, one he had taken from the school's kitchen. When police searched his backpack that night, they found a hammer along with a laptop and a cell phone that had recently been stolen from another location, a law office not far away, and a gold watch that linked back to yet another break-in just a few days before. And this wasn't even the first time he'd broken into that specific nursery school. The owner suspected that he was also the guy responsible for breaking in and stealing cash previously.
I mean, if the theory is that he broke in to steal money or valuables or whatever and was maybe interrupted or caught, then this guy makes a ton of sense. Even his weapon of choice is consistent.
Well, and that's not even the only thing his crimes had in common, actually. You see, Philomena's window was on the 2nd floor of the cottage, which is almost 12 feet above the ground. And there wasn't a balcony under it or anything, which means getting in through the window would have required someone who could basically scale the side of the house. And to be honest, it looks impossible, but it's exactly what Rudy had done during previous break-ins.
So are police thinking this was just a random thing then? He picked a house where the lights were off and went for it?
Well, actually, Rudy and Meredith knew one another, not super well or anything, but according to a Vanity Fair article written by Judy Bachrock, Rudy would sometimes hang out in the apartment below Meredith's and smoke pot with the guys who lived there. That's actually where he and Meredith met just a month before her murder.
So they know of each other, but they didn't really know each other, just in passing.
Yeah, exactly. So police have a really good potential suspect, one with an MO that matches the scene of the crime and whose fingerprints are not just at the scene, but under the body in blood. It is a no-brainer for an arrest. There's only one problem. He's nowhere to be found. He'd been seen at a nightclub in the early morning hours of November 2nd, just after Meredith's murder. But after that, it's like he vanished. But investigators have an idea about how to find him. They approach a friend of Rudy's, this guy Giacomo, and ask if he'll come down to the police station and see if he can get a hold of Rudy. So on November 17th, this is now 16 days after the murder, Giacomo reaches out to Rudy from the police station via Skype. And police get lucky because Rudy takes the bait. Rudy tells his friend that he knows the Peruvian authorities are looking for him, which is why he fled to Germany. He says he's got nowhere to live and no money, and he's terrified. He knows police found his fingerprints, but he insists that if that's true, they were left before the murder.
I'm sorry, they were left in blood. That's not how that works, dude.
Yeah, well, that's just what he says at first. But over the course of their conversation, as Giacomo asks him questions about this thing that police found or that thing the media said, Rudy's own version of events start to take shape. Rudy tells Giacomo that he and Meredith ran into each other at a mutual friend's place the night before the murder, on Halloween. The two of them got to talking and hit it off. According to a transcript of a call I found on the site run by the University of Missouri Kansas City Law School, Rudy says they made a plan to meet up the next night, November 1st. He says Meredith told him she already had plans with her friends, but that she'd bail early so they could, meet up at her place and essentially hook up, which he says they did, or at least they sort of did. Rudy says that they did hook up for a little while, but stopped short of intercourse because neither of them had a condom. At this point, Rudy tells Giacomo that the kebab he'd had on the way to Meredith started to cause problems with his stomach and he had to use the bathroom, badly. He says he was in there for a while, almost 3 songs on an iPod playlist apparently, when he heard the doorbell ring. He says he didn't think anything of it, just figured it was one of her roommates or whatever, but then out of nowhere, he heard this blood-curdling scream. Rudy says that it was so loud and he was so concerned that he practically leapt off the toilet, pants not even pulled up all the way. It was pretty dark in the hallway. I mean, they had the lights really low, but Rudy says that he was able to see a man holding a knife, and he saw Meredith, throat cut with blood everywhere. Rudy tells Giacomo about some kind of struggle between him and the guy, and I've been trying to figure out how to sum this up, but I think it might be better if I just let you read from the transcript. And just keep in mind that this was translated from Italian, so read slow.
It says, quote, "I've got wounds on my hands because I grabbed his hand. He tried to stab me, and I still have the wounds on my hands, the signs, that are healing now, but I still have them on my hand. I tried to help her, Giacomo. It's not that. My blood, no, I don't know if there's any or not because I didn't bleed. I didn't actually bleed. My wounds that I had, the guy just wounded me lightly. It didn't bleed. Now, I can't tell you. I tried to help her. And if my prints are in the house, it's obvious because I touched everything." End quote. So he's saying he got cut, but not enough to leave blood at the scene. Or he's not sure about that, but his prints are definitely going to be all over. And not just because he was there as a guest, but because he tried to help Meredith after her attack.
Yeah, that's what he's saying. And he goes on to say that the man who attacked Meredith basically ran for it. So he gathered up towels to try and stop the bleeding from the wound on Meredith's neck. And at some point, he says he realized he was in the middle of this horrific crime scene, alone, drenched in blood, and that if he called for help, police were going to for sure walk in and see this black guy covered in blood and think for sure he did it. But he tells Giacomo he didn't do it, which is why, in the end, he says that he ran.
I mean, but he could have made an anonymous call or something. This whole thing just seems really sketch.
Well, he says that basically his first instinct was to call for help, but he didn't have a phone to call from.
Okay, but Meredith had not one but two phones, right? Plus, the doorbell ringing, there is a broken window. None of that makes sense. I personally am not buying this for a second, and I'm assuming the police don't either, right?
Yeah, they for sure don't think he's telling the truth about not being involved or any part of this story.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they issue an international warrant for his arrest the next day on November 20th. He's stopped by authorities trying to board a train to Frankfurt without a ticket, and while they have him, they run his ID and arrest him on the spot. It takes some time to get Rudy out of Germany and back to Italy, but on December 6th, that finally happens.
So do they charge him for murder, or are they still gathering evidence, or what?
They don't charge him with anything yet. But here's one way the Italian justice system is different from ours here in the US. Apparently, suspects can be held in police custody for up to a year while the prosecution gets its ducks in a row to either charge him or not.
What?
Yeah, in the book I mentioned earlier, The Forgotten Killer, they say that in the US, it's 48 hours max, and we've seen that, we can hold you for 48 hours and then we have to let you go. Mm-hmm. It's always what I've heard, but this is not the US, this is Italy, and frankly, the surprises are just getting started. In July 2008, 7 months after his arrest in Germany, police finally charged Rudy Guede in connection with Meredith's murder. 2 months later, his defense team requests what's called a fast-track trial, where a judge looks at the evidence collected so far and makes a determination about a suspect's guilt or innocence.
So it's a fast track because there's basically no jury.
Well, it's a fast track because there's no trial, at least not one we would recognize from our legal system. According to reporting by Phoebe Nathanson and Ann Wise for ABC News, quote, "A fast-track trial procedure calls for an immediate decision based on the evidence already represented to the court and allows for a reduction of an eventual guilty sentence by 1/3, end quote.
Oh.